Do you eat lunch with your laptop? Do you find yourself in back to back meetings and you can't wait for a call to end because you really need to go pee? Or do you find yourself exhausted at the end of the day because now you're supposed to make dinner? Sorry if I'm triggering you when asking these questions. And I am not here to call you out. I'm just here to call you in for a deep conversation about the words work life balance. How do those words make you feel? Maybe like me, you find those words annoying, that as a woman, we should balance and be able to do all the things, be a beauty pageant queen while at the same time a productivity ninja. But here's the thing about work life balance, it's a lie. And today I'm joined by my friend, Natalie Kuhn, the co CEO and founding teacher of The Class, a global digital wellness company that combines fitness and mindfulness. And in this episode, we talk about being a woman, talk about grief, and how our upbringing does affect how we live. Natalie was actually brought up by an ex nun and a doctor, and she just found out her grandma was Miss Philippines. All right, let's drop the beat. Legacy leader, welcome to the Color Your Dreams podcast for women of color and allies. I'm Elaine Lucartas, your host and a business and career coach that LA Weekly named the #1 thought leader and Apple News named one of the top 5 business coaches. I know you've established yourself in a leadership and executive role, and this podcast is here to remind you that you can create a holistic life so you can lead without sacrificing your well-being. So expect me and my guests to have some conscious conversations with you on creating intentional direction and sustainable strategies so that you can create an aligned team, career, business, and life. Don't worry, I'm not going to give you a one-size-fits-all prescription. You'll learn how to define your own holistic leadership so you can prioritize a life led by fulfillment and self-trust. Now, grab your coffee, tea, or boba, and let's follow your dreams to lead your legacy. Hey, legacy leaders. I am excited to have Natalie Kuhn on here. Natalie, you're not showing how really messy your place is because I'm sitting in this kid's chair right now. For those watching video, like at my
Keeping it
boyfriend's
real.
mom's home. Yeah, just keeping it real. You're at your nephew's room, right?
Yeah, we've got my 3 nephews who are all under the age of 10 staying. We're all under one roof right now, and it's beautiful mayhem.
That sounds like a Filipino household, which I just learned from Natalie that her grandmother was Miss Philippines.
Yes. This was news to me too. I always knew that my grandmother had a lot of Filipino blood and my grandfather has a lot of Spanish blood, and that's very confusing for people because I come in such a light-skinned body, but my father is Irish and German, so that I don't know, it overtook my mother's genes. But my siblings sent this article around last week of unknown information about my grandmother and an old sepia toned photograph of her in her, you know, outfit, in her dress, in her like winning attire. And it's so interesting because Elaine, how we got into this was we were chatting in person together about
Yes.
how our lineage keeps coming back around and we can learn so much about our path forward if we investigate our past. And my family has been deep into this because we are planning a trip to Manila this coming winter to trace my grandfather and grandmother's footsteps from their childhood.
Uh,
How cool is that?
I know. I'm so excited. We
Yeah.
just delved deep. I didn't even introduce who you are. We
Ah!
just yes, Natalie Kuhn is the granddaughter of Miss Philippines
Yes.
back in the day.
I'm gonna put that on my business card.
I know. No, actually, you should update it because I was looking at your bio, right? You know, your mom's an ex-nun, your dad's a
Yeah.
doctor, and your grandmother is former Miss
Thank
Philippines.
you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. I will send you an invoice after this interview. And so, not only this is our third date together. The first two dates were in person. We met at Create and Cultivate, and I was just captivated by Natalie when she was up in the panel talking about work-life balance.
Mm.
And I was fortunate enough, like, oh, she is alone. Let me go fangirl her up. So Natalie is the co-CEO and founding teacher of the class. It combines both fitness and mindfulness. You could connect with yourself. I was grateful enough to experience that in person with Natalie 2 days ago before recording this. And you started the class with Taryn Toomey in her apartment in New York. And you now have two studios from New York and LA and a digital platform serving
Ah,
clients in 71 different countries. Congratulations. And it's been 5, 6 years in business? Yeah, I
10.
know.
It's
Congrats on
been a whole
surviving.
decade. Yeah, thank you so
No,
much. And
seriously, because
no,
10
no,
years.
it is surviving. That is absolutely right.
And thriving
Yeah.
clearly.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Taryn Toomey is our founder, and she used to be a fitness instructor. She was a yoga instructor. And then she had two baby girls. And in the middle of that fiery initiation of becoming a mother and then becoming a second mother, she needed a practice that would allow her to move those energies, that fire through her body. And she started to play around with some stuff in the gym of her apartment building. And it was at that time I was a performer. I was an actor. I was dancing for rock bands and I was working odd jobs, one of which was Lululemon. And she came in to buy some pants and I was folding them. And we hit it off. And I took a class and I kind of like, have you ever like cried, laughed? I was like cry laughing because it was so hard.
Girl, I'm
It was so
Filipino.
hard.
Like, I know you're a corner, but like that happens all the time in my family. I think I just need to invite you to a Filipino party. So I'm
But
assuming
like,
you
am I
go.
in pain or am I
Yeah.
celebrating? I'm not sure. And so anyway, I joined her 10 years ago and along with another founding teacher, JC Gossett. And it was just the three of us for a couple of years while it was gestating and while we were figuring out what it is. I think the difference between the class and some other businesses is that there are some businesses that are created by an executive board. And a board gets in the room and they've got a whiteboard up and they've got a strategy that's worked in the past and a formula and an algorithm for success and scalability. Woo! That
Oh,
just, for me, that ain't it. And,
it makes me
this
want to change the topic of this podcast episode, but continue. We'll see how it goes and flows, you know?
honestly, this was born out of a need, out of desire, out of something that was inspiring to Taryn and to the three of us that connected us to ourselves, that was authentic, that was coming from the inside out. And there was no business plan, there was no business model. And over the course of 10 years, it took on a life of its own. And now, as you said, we have two brick and mortar locations that function also as production studios, and we live stream mindful movement practices to 71 countries across the globe. So it's taken on a life of its own, I'm proud to say.
Congrats. Well, I'm still like a baby. I just surpassed I'm about to hit my 6-year mark. I think the time
Yeah.
this podcast episode comes out is going to be 6 years.
Happy birthday! Happy
I
work
know.
day!
Thank you. But, I don't know. I'm curious if this happened to you because we have listeners who are probably around the same time or maybe just starting their business, where after the 5th year, this past year in my business, it was a lot of, I don't like these models that I'm seeing.
Yeah,
Like I want to honor my own.
yeah.
Like this looks really sexy on Instagram, but this doesn't feel good. And it's been a lot of shredding of like, what feels good for me? What do I want to focus on? I appreciate that you in 10 years, not that you do all the classes, but you still teach some of the classes. As a coach, I love coaching my clients still, right? Like, the big board people, the suited up people will tell you, like, get out of that, focus on the other things. Like, no, I need to stay connected with my people.
Yeah. It's to use their language, the suit language, it keeps you connected to product, it keeps you connected to your customer, it keeps you connected to the why. But in my own language, I think anybody who is an entrepreneur is at their core an artist. And
Yeah.
I think whatever means necessary, stay connected to your art as you develop your business.
So can you share that, how you've stayed connected to the art within 10 years with all the different
Absolutely.
dynamics?
One of them is exactly what you said. I still teach, and it keeps me rooted in my own self-development, in understanding. I check in with myself to understand what movement my body needs, what emotional, mental practice my spirit needs, and then I bring that into the room. But as dedicated as I am to teaching, I'm more dedicated to studentship. So I try to be in the room with other teachers, and then I always am in formal training outside of the class ecosystem once a year. So I'm trying a new certification program with this teacher or that teacher or this method or this science, just to keep myself stretching and evolving and
Yeah.
learning.
I love that you shared that. I'm doing this call for my own session for myself from Natalie, but that's been very validating because even in the past of year, it's not even I need to learn a new strategy, how to grow my business.
Right.
I'm already getting consistent clients. I know where they're coming from.
Right.
But the question is, how can I be better? Not bigger. It's a different
Yeah.
word.
Yes.
Better and deeper
Yeah.
and be there with my clients. Like I loved how when you started the class, there was just this theme of speeding up, slowing down, which is initially why I wanted you to be in this podcast interview about that. Like how why is work-life balance so contradictory? I also know you
Mm.
gave the metaphor of the hands
Yes.
and how they go
Yeah.
against each other.
Yeah, what I shared at Create and Cultivate where we met is that when I really think that the idea that we've been fed that, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life is actually
Mhm.
really harmful because if you will work every day of your life if you do what you love because your passion is driving you and there's something calling you forth from within. And the only way that you're going to survive the creation and the thriving of your own business is if you learn to establish boundaries with your work so that your work doesn't consume your life and that your life isn't just about your work. And the way that I think about that is that the concept of balance pits the different parts and different aspects of our life against each other because on one hand you've got your relationship and on one hand you've got your work, and if one is heavier or lighter than the other they're balancing against each other. And actually, we don't want to pit the aspects of our life against. We want them to work in a kind of fluidity, in a conversation, in a harmony with each other, as if they were each its own volume dial. And maybe one, sometimes you need a little bass and you get that bass turned up. And then sometimes you realize, oh, I can't hear the hi hat anymore. So you turn down the bass and you bring up the hi hat. And so, actually, instead of balance, can we think about it as a symphony or a concerto or a killer Beyonce song? Can we see it as everything coming into concert with itself?
I love it. I also share with my own clients that there's like a season of things, right? Our priorities are so different from when we were kids, high school, college, our 20s, 30s, 40s. Like it's different within each stage. And then unfortunately, there are situations that come to our life absolutely outside of our control where things shift.
Yeah.
Like I know for you, you've shared your story in other presentations and podcasts you've been in where your mom passed away suddenly and
Yeah.
navigating through that
Yeah.
grief. Like, I would love for you to share that and
Yeah.
how
It is
that has
wild.
shaped you and how you dealt with it then. Both my grandmothers passed away within a year, and I remember when
Mm.
we were talking to each other, I was like, "Wow." I feel a deeper connection with them now than I did before, and a more knowing of me and not willing to take shit.
Beautiful.
So I'm curious
That's
what your
beautiful.
journey was with grief.
Yeah, what you're pointing to, the seasonality that you're introducing is really, really important because inherent in the concept of seasonality is the deeper cycles of our life, the deeper
Mm.
epochs that move, the deeper, slower beginning, middles, and ends that don't have to do with the everyday office. They have to do with long strings of years. And for me, the passing of my mother was one of those epochs. And it was sudden. I did not, nobody saw it coming. She was not sick. It was just, she woke up, she said she was going to take a nap, and she passed away. And the shock of that, the trauma of that really, I think the deep, profound grief of that still winds its way in surprising ways into my life, but the massive undulation of it happened in the 2 years that were after it, and I think it's because at the ripe old age of 27, I hadn't experienced in some ways, I was lucky because I hadn't experienced a massive death until that point, but also that's relatively young. What is time? What is age? But for me, it was a before and after. It was a BCAD moment. And it brought me into relationship with finality, with my relationship to my mother. We all have dynamic relationships to our mothers, to the future that I had been that existed in my mind of, yeah, I wanted to have a baby with my mother next to me.
Mm.
I wanted to cross my threshold into my 30s with my mother at the party. There was still so much life that we had to live together. And now she passed away 9 years ago, and I'm living into a new epoch where my fiance 5 weeks ago was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic melanoma cancer.
Oh, I'm
And in an
sorry.
instant, my our lives completely changed. We moved cities in order to get ourselves closer to the care that we felt was necessary. My family has come down from all parts of the country to help us move into an apartment. I'm so lucky and so privileged
Mm.
to be blessed with a family that we all are very connected. The friends and community have really rallied. My company has had to make shifts in order to account for these things. And of course, my fiance is facing his mortality and 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 me in relationship to that. So this is not to say like I'm going through all this stuff. This is to say, wow, my mom's passing was 9 years ago. There was a slow and steady undulating of life that moved through in that time. And then just when things start to get quiet, something else comes. And it's not that that's ever going to end because it is seasonal. Another season comes. And the real question is, how do you meet it in a very human way and not a robotic way? How do you bring your full self to it? How do you learn from it? How do you choose to see it as an opportunity to grow as opposed to something that is being done to you? And
Yeah.
that's where I am right now, in fact.
It's uh, grief is interesting, and seeing people you love going through changes out of their control, physically, mentally, or emotionally. And I think we've seen this a lot more because of the pandemic, right? And it might also just be your age at this time.
Yeah.
Like you got it 27. I think I got it like we're the same age. Like I felt like 30s was like, oh my gosh, I'm not that I'm not in my 20s anymore. Like I am seeing life leave.
As they say, adulting is hard.
It is hard. And
Yeah.
and the beauty, I mean, obviously the pandemic was real, people died, were sick, but the beauty of the pandemic also made us realize what was important for us in our lives. And our own definition individually is going to be different from other people, and there's no right or wrong.
One of my favorite poets, his name was John O'Donohue, who passed away a long time ago. He would say, "Do we have to be in trouble to remember what's most important?" It's really something to sit
Mm.
with, isn't it? And I think the truth is we may. we may have to be in trouble to remember what's important because the familiarity of our everyday lives becomes so intoxicating and so hypnotizing that sometimes we need something big and urgent to sort of crack through what is so familiar in order to pull back and see the truer picture.
I'm sure you've heard something similar to this, and I don't know exactly where I heard it, but universe, God, Beyonce, Shakira, whatever higher being you believe in, right? It always comes in whispers,
Mm,
not the booming like Hollywood movie. There is a light, and God or the
right,
universe is telling you what you need to do. It
right,
actually comes in whispers if we're courageous enough to sit
right.
still instead of speeding up or scrolling. I know you've shared this many times before, but I would love for you to share the importance of the pause, the importance and the beauty of the uncomfortable.
Oh, thank you. That's a great and generous question. Well, it does bring me back to the method of the class that I feel very dedicated to. And for those who are listening who haven't tried it, well, first of all, theclass.com/Natalie, everybody listening, you are gifted 30 days for free so you can hop on your mat and give it a shot. The idea here is that you are using your body in very recognizable fitness moves like squats and jumping jacks and etc. But the purpose is not to attain any kind of optical illusion of perfection. As we know, it is a fiction mm, derived by a sick culture. so, so we're not doing it for some kind of shapely Adonis. We're doing it for the purpose of inquiry, of self development, of going deeper and understanding at my fatigue and in my exhaustion. And we're just using the body as the container. What comes up for me emotionally? What comes up for me in my thoughts? And can I work with that in a good way? And can I develop tools that help me find stability and joy and presence in my everyday life? And then the byproduct is you get a strong body. So if I were to answer your question more succinctly, I would say the class is the practice of deep inner listening. The reason why deep inner listening is so crucial and important is that thoughts and inherited programming, inherited conditioning, cultural programming, cultural conditioning, familial conditioning are all beliefs and stories that we don't actually know aren't ours. We absorb them because we're at an age where our consciousness hasn't developed and it's all we know. And then the part of us that actually is us, our essence, our connection to our soul's purpose, our spirit, is buried under the noise of all these other beliefs. And in the deeper listening, we get really good at starting to sift through who we think we should be, who we think we ought to be, who we think we need to be.
Mm.
And we reconnect to what really wants to come through in this lifetime. My spirit chose this body, my soul chose this period of time for some next evolution. And if I get quiet enough, I can hear it calling from within, calling me out from within.
We're also saying this not even individually, but even as this in our society, in our
Yeah.
culture, in our country.
Yeah.
There's a great book I'm reading by Seth Godin called The Song of Significance. I don't know if you've heard of that
I
book.
haven't.
I think you would enjoy it because it just talks about how we're in this intelligence age, this knowledge age, yet our society is still run like the Industrial Revolution, right?
Mm,
That idea from Henry Ford, the Ford
mm,
company with the cars, you just do these widgets 8 hours a day, like everything's compartmentalized.
mm,
And that was just a century ago. A century later,
mm.
we're still living it. Okay, we're going to be stuck in our cars. We're going to be in the metro for an hour. We're going to be in this tiny cubicle for 8 hours.
Right.
This was all made up. And the pandemic just heightened it, questioning, wait, why do we need to be in office? For
Right.
those of you that work full time for a company, I could work from home. This will be easier so I could walk my kids to school, walk them back. There's that questioning, that uncomfortable conversation that is happening, while at the same time being mindful of the fact that things are shifting and changing. We're evolving,
Yeah.
not just biologically as humans, but as society and culture.
Yeah, I think what you're also pointing to is this notion of hyper separateness that,
Mm,
you go in your car that way, I go in my car that way. And because we seem to be going in two different paths, we're not connected. I'm in my own world. I'm separate from you. You're separate from me. And, that is a very Western hyper individualism concept. And in, more Eastern philosophies or Eastern lineages, it's quite the opposite. It is the interconnectedness or the intraconnectedness of us all. And it reminds me of, I was lucky enough to interview one of my heroes. His name is Dr. Dan Siegel, and he's the director of the Mindsight Institute at UCLA. And he was telling me about a bus ride that he took with my other heroes. I was like, oh my God, to be on that bus. But, Reverend Angel Keanu Williams and all these people. And they ended up going to this forest in, I want to say Utah, it's in his book. I'll have to find it for you. And they get to this forest and they're looking and they're standing in the middle of the forest and there's 40,000 tree trunks, individual trees. And the guide was explaining that when you turn around and you do a 360, what meets the human eye is 40,000 different trees. When you go under the layer of the earth and examine the root system, what you come to find out is that the roots are coming from one source. It's 40,000 trees from one seed that have sprouted across the land to create 40,000 limbs of this one source point deep under the earth. And that we can use that as a good metaphor for all that is. You might look different than me. We might have different educational backgrounds, life experiences, religious experiences, spiritual experiences, different likes and dislikes. But could it be possible that at the very birthplace of our humanness is the same essence, a oneness? Now, that's not to bypass the importance of recognizing difference, but it is to say, can we all recognize the oneness from which we all come? The tree, the plant, the cloud, the you, the me, the we of it, while celebrating all that makes us unique.
I love that. I mean, we're both LA natives, right? Like, I know
Yeah.
you live in the West Side, I live in the East Side. And the beauty of LA is the diversity. And I would joke around, it's not just diversity in people. I'm like, I get the diversity of food.
Yes.
Like, I don't just have Panda Express. I have Thai food,
Yes.
Vietnamese food, like Cambodian food, Indian food, Filipino food, different types of like egg rolls, whether it's lumpias or not. There's beauty in that. And it was interesting because what I thought you were going to bring up is actually in your current state right now, how you are with your nephews, you found an apartment, you have your family who is supporting you.
Mm. Yeah.
That village, that community, it's so important. I mean, even my partner and I are looking at homes right now, and like I shared a necessity, like what's necessary is that I need to be close enough to my parents because
right.
I want to take them to doctor appointments or just be there because
Yeah.
they're getting older. We can't
Yeah.
control age.
And it really it is a privilege to have that kind of relationship with family
Correct.
because not
Correct.
everybody has that same connection point. And there are some folks in my life and also in my classes who have made the very courageous and valiant choice to separate from their family in order for their future lineage to have a better chance at being healthy. And I want to celebrate those people who, have found that that separation is what's needed for fulfillment and a better life. I happen to have a family in which that connectedness is supportive and generative for me. How lucky am I? And it sounds like you are too.
Yes, I understand the privilege. Legacy leader,
Want more tips and advice for your business, career, and life? Sign up for my Gifts and Gifts newsletter at elainelu.com/join. So here's 3 things you'll get. 1, you'll get funny gifts, because who doesn't love memes and pop culture references? This newsletter is so fetch. 2, you'll also receive actionable gifts, tips on your business, career, and life. And 3rd, you'll also receive the gift of me. So my Gifts and Gifts newsletter is like an up-to-date diary. Think Zanga or Live Journal, where I'm going to share vulnerable stories, relatable mistakes, and important life tips like what to watch on Netflix. So if you're ready for those fun gifts and actionable gifts to create a more sustainable life, join my newsletter at elainelu.com/join.
And I would love for you to share if you have any insight or advice as we go back to boundaries, right? Whether it is family, chosen family, maybe outgrowing from other people, having different viewpoints, not because one is better or the other. What advice would you have for others?
That's beautiful. I think whenever I'm trying to understand where a good, healthy boundary is, I try to ask a couple of questions. What is my responsibility here in this situation and in this circumstance? What is not my responsibility here? And then what is the responsibility to the space between us? This goes for intimacy, and this also goes for strangers.
Mm.
I have more of a responsibility to the space between me and my fiance, so I'm going to care for it in a particular way, and I'm going to ask as if it is an entity, as if it is its own living, breathing thing. I'm going to ask about me, I'm going to ask about you, and then I'm going to ask about the space between us. And that there's a different texture to that, depending on what the relationship is. But if you can tune in, and again, it comes back to the practice of the class or meditation or yoga or whatever, breath work, whatever your version of mindfulness is, can you get into the deeper listening so that you can hear the answer almost like unveil or reveal itself, as opposed to a mandate or some kind of tyranny from outside? What is mine? What is yours? And what is the responsibility to the space between us?
The deeper listening. I want to dive into that. Get it? The pun, deeper diving. It seems like from this conversation, both of us have done our internal work to be willing to deep dive. But I know for me, I can't say for you, there were times in my life where it was hard to deep dive, to stay still, sit in that uncomfortable and pause. And there might be some of our listeners where it's hard for them to do that.
Yeah,
And
I would.
well, I think, my question is like, what would you recommend for them to do?
Right.
And obviously,
Now
I
what?
understand it's going to be different for each person. Like, there's
Yeah.
not a magic formula.
Yeah. I think, I wish I could say that I have done the work. I would say I'm very much going to be doing the work until my last dying day, because I'm in it right now. I'm in a
Mm.
whole big, complex, messy world of existence because the circumstances are, objectively difficult. And how I meet them is the work. How I meet those circumstances is the practice. It doesn't, we often think that practice is what happens on the mat, but practice is meant to translate from the mat and into our relationships and our circumstances and our boardrooms and our bedrooms. And so, to your point, now what? How do we do it? I think the very first thing is to become aware of, well, very first step, become aware that you're thinking. If you're hearing a thought, then you are not your thought. If you're
Mm.
hearing it, then how could you be it? Right. So if
Mm.
you hear yourself thinking, then you are not that thought. And if you're having that thought of, I'm not enough, and you're able to hear the fact that you're saying, I'm not enough, well, then who's saying it? Who is the one
That's a better
speaking?
question. Who?
Who is the one speaking? So then you can start to identify, oh, a part of me. It's not me, a part of me is having this insecurity. A part of me is worried, a part of me is stressed, a part of me is joyful. And then you get good at sort of identifying those voices and that language. And over time, you begin to dialogue with those voices. If anybody is interested in sort of an entry text on this particular facet of mindfulness, we always suggest starting with The Untethered Soul. It's a book that's part of our
Love
library
that
at the
book.
class.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's just a very good way in. And then now, should you have heard that before and you're already practicing that and you're sort of looking for the next step would say is, what is this discomfort trying to teach me? So now we've heard our voices. Now we know that we're in a moment of stress or discomfort. And then rather than having that discomfort be something that's happening to us, which is where we become very reflexive, become very reactive. Often our impulses live in that belief system that things are happening to us. Can we reframe it and say this discomfort is a landmark? It's a threshold crossing where I have an opportunity to grow. I have an opportunity to mature here and tolerate myself in the given circumstances. They say given circumstances, and mine are very particularly difficult right now. And I've been using that language in my mind, given, which means that they have been gifted. These circumstances are gifted to me. So if I think about the stage 4 cancer diagnosis of my fiance as a gift, then what is meant to come of this? I'm meant to learn patience. I'm meant to learn reprioritization. I'm meant to remember what really matters. I'm meant to protect the space between us. I'm meant to understand what it means to be a caregiver without losing myself. I'm meant to understand what health really means holistically and healing. What does healing really mean? And these are the investigations that I'm lucky enough to step into. Now, those are my good days. On my bad days, I'm still like, why, universe, why? So I'm not on a high horse in any way, shape, or form. But, we oscillate between our lower selves and our higher selves, our good days and our bad days.
Yeah, I met up for lunch with an old friend who we knew each other in high school. And obviously, we're reflecting and reminiscing. And I was just like, oh, I just don't miss it. And she's like, what do you mean? You don't miss hanging out with us? Or we're like, no, the person I was, not like, not you, but who I was because I didn't know how to, I don't want to say the word manage. I'm trying to find a more appropriate word, but how to deal with life in general. I grew up in a household, very Filipino culture in terms of being reactive right away, responding right away. You have emotion, you share it right away. Not that there is anything wrong with it, but what I kept doing, as I could hear your dog doing, like I would yell, I would bark, I would. So it's so funny that your dog was barking because the universe just validates things. If our listeners could hear that from like a couple of minutes ago. But I was like, gosh, I just remember when I would get into uncomfortable conversations in past relationships, friendships, or even family members where I would just yell and show my emotion. And now that I'm older, I'm like, let me sit with this, even though it's so uncomfortable. And like to your point, what is this teaching me? Where is it coming from? Is it really from me or is it from something else? Is it, are there things I need to work on? I'm not saying I am perfect. I remember I actually yelled at my dad because my dad bought something that was pretty expensive. And I was like, Dad, you didn't do your research. Like I Googled it and I saw all the bad reviews. And then he just like started crying. And then I waited the next day. This just happened 2 weeks ago. I called him the next day and I said, hey, I'm so sorry. I yelled at you. I shouldn't have. And it was very fascinating what my dad said in response. I'm not mad at you. I'm actually mad at your grandma, my mom. Like, what? Yeah, just because she didn't know how to communicate and do all of these things. I'm like, wow. That it was just so fascinating that my dad shared that.
mm,
because I was acknowledging, oh my gosh, my dad, I yelled at him
mm,
and I'm so sorry.
mm, mm, mm. Yeah. And can we also look back on those actions and sort of thank a younger self for their limitations and what that younger self was working with the consciousness that the tools that they had at the time, and make repair in the present moment where
Mm.
repair is needed. It's, I think, to your point or your joke about, I'm not perfect. It's I don't think the goal ever should be about perfection. We are never not going to harm. We are going to harm, either because we're consciously doing it or unconsciously doing it. We may not know that we're doing it because our level of consciousness is at that that limitation. The question is, can we reflect on it and repair and stretch our limits so that we can act and be and love from our more mature, evolved, learned self?
Oh, reflect and repair. I love that.
So important. So important. As we're all waking up to ourselves. We're all waking up. I'm waking up at 38. I'm waking up to my history of, you know, my mom's past with religion and discomfort, and my father's past of work and et cetera, and waking up to my whiteness, and waking up to my leadership, and waking up to the recession, and waking up to teaching in this body in this day and age. So as I continue to wake up, can I be kind to what was and who was, ask for forgiveness, increase my level of tolerance and compassion, and yeah, and repair where is needed.
Oh my gosh. I was just like, were you in my therapy session like last year when I was healing my inner child? Is that
Oh gosh. Yeah, we got to get good at like tolerating our humanness.
Yeah, it was so fascinating. I've always advocated this in other podcast episodes, but I love EMDR therapy and I did that
Uh-huh.
last year and I did a
Yes.
lot of healing around my inner
Great.
child
It's great.
and loving on her. Mm,
Yeah. So important. So
yeah.
important.
I loved when I saw you speak, you're talking about the importance of self-awareness and our relationship with fear. So I would love for you to share more about that.
Absolutely. The relationship between awareness and fear. And it's such a great question. Whatever it is that we are not aware of is in the driver's seat. So let's say that we're afraid of disappointing people. So then we walk into our first date, we walk into our first boardroom, we walk into our all hands meeting, we walk into our children's classroom. And what's driving is this fear of disappointing people. And our decisions are going to be made from there. Our actions are going to be taking place from there. Our strategies are going to be developed from that place until we become aware of them. And once we become aware, oh, wow, I have this fear that I'm not going to survive the disappointment from somebody that I love. And then we might do the work necessary. Maybe you need a guide or a therapist or a friend or a loved one to sort of hold your hand as you go through the disappointment, the experience of disappointing somebody, and you realize that you can survive.
Mm.
Where you sit with that belief long enough and you question it. Is it true? Is it true that I won't survive if they're disappointed? And the reality is, of course, you're going to survive. Some part of you is just deeply rooted in that fear. So if if I ground myself in that realization, if they're disappointed, life will not be over. Imagine how different that first date is. Imagine that meeting with your VC firm is. Imagine how differently you show up because you're no longer holding this unconscious bullhorn that's saying, don't disappoint them. But instead, another voice is coming through. If you're okay, you've got this. It's, you're enough. You're, even if you disappoint somebody, you're going to survive. You're going to get back up. And so to round this out, the practice of awareness is so important so that you can put you in the driver's seat rather than anything and everything that you are unconsciously driven by.
Natalie, and I say this as a compliment, it's gonna sound weird, but I feel attacked. Like not now, not in the
Too
present
close? Too
state.
soon?
No, this is just our third date and you're already attacking me. But I say that because it's interesting that theme has happened multiple times in my own life. It
Sure.
happened when I graduated college in 2010. And that was like around the recession, and I didn't have a job landed yet. I'm like, oh my God, straight A's, I had 4.0 valedictorian. Why don't I have anything? I followed the checklist. I
Right.
followed the notes. And then I got my master's in leadership and management because I was on track to be an executive director for a nonprofit. The day I graduated, I'm like, shit, I've been following what
Mm.
everyone told me to do. And that's when I wanted to start my own business. That was in
Mm.
2017. And then recently, last year, which is why I went to therapy, it was like this anxiety of needing to do the most, doing all of it,
Mm.
because that's what society was telling me. I need to be on Instagram. I need to do all these events and all these things. Like I was just keeping up with the Joneses. Before keeping up with the
Mhm,
Kardashians was a
mhm,
show. It
mhm.
came from the book, like it came from keeping up with the Joneses. For
Yeah.
Gen Zers listening to this, you could go Google or Chat GPT it up. I think that's the word. I don't know yet. So and what's been so freeing was because I worked on it. It's like, "Oh, wow. It's a new it's a
Right.
new playing field. It's a new world. You mean
Right.
it's a Friday and I could sit in this little kiddie chair? Like, right before this, I went to, like, a pastrami place to have lunch, and that wasn't scheduled. You mean in about 2 weeks, I'm about to go to Tanzania and
Wow.
hike Mount Kilimanjaro and do a safari, where importantly,
Wow,
I'm off
that's
the grid with no
amazing.
laptop? Like, that's
Incredible. I celebrate you. Congratulations choosing that for yourself. That's great.
oh, yeah, I'm training for it. I'm kinda nervous, but that's a different
Wow.
conversation. But
So cool.
it's just so freeing when as we were talking about that self-awareness, the relationship of fear, of sitting with it, and then even deep diving in whatever support you need, and it will be different for each individual and
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, absolutely right. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So I would love for you to share, always like ending episodes with what is one action, and the action could be doing nothing too, by the way. What is
Great.
one action you have for our listeners and one reflective question? And maybe it's the same thing.
Mm. Well, I would say one very practical tool is when you feel lost in thought, lost in emotion, lost in stress or worry. Ask yourself this one simple question. Can I feel the aliveness in my hands? What that does is it brings your awareness inside of you and out of your
Mm.
mind and into your body. And it places your focus into one location where you can truly ground the hamster wheel brain and give it one job. And that one job is, can I feel the aliveness in my hands? And it brings you right back to your body. Another tool that we use in the class all the time, and you practiced this with us 2 days ago, which is put on your favorite song and tap your heels on the floor to the beat. I know that sounds silly, but choose a song that matches the energy you seek. Choose a song that matches the state that you'd like to be in. And then first, tap your heels to the floor. Tapping your heels to the floor wakes up your proprioceptive system. The tapping of the heels sends sensation through your joints, through your knees, through your hips, all the way up your head. And that sensation tells your mind, we're here. We're
Mm.
not in tomorrow. We're not in yesterday. We're not in that meeting anymore. We're here. And then as you tap your heels, keep moving, shake your body, dance, roll your shoulders, stretch, turn on the class's digital studio, try one of the moves that we do, and find your way back into your feet, your hands, your body, your skin, because we can get lost in the mind, and the body is where our soul has chosen to reside. So come home.
Ooh, I love that. I honestly moved because the chair moved, but I felt like that was just more of an indicator, like, hey, listen to your body.
Beautiful.
So,
Beautiful.
Natalie, how can people find you? Because I'm sure people are
Oh,
obsessed with you now.
oh gosh, thank you so much. And really thank you for inviting me into this conversation with you. I'm a big fan since we met those weeks ago. And I'm really grateful you do the work that you do in the world for women of color and allies and for entrepreneurs. So thank you for what you do and for this conversation. Folks can find me for the 30-day free trial for all of your listeners. You can go to theclass.com/Natalie. And there's no H, it's just Natalie, theclass.com/Natalie. On Instagram, it's at the class. And me personally, I'm at this is Natalie. This is Natalie. Take it or leave it.
And
So,
I'll add all of that to the show notes. So you could just click on this episode so you could check that out. And all of you that are listening are probably getting aha moments. So if you love this episode, please share this with a friend and why they should listen. Be sure to follow Natalie, take up on that 30-day class.
thank you.
And then if you fall in love with it, then just keep going and feel free to leave a review and rating. But thank you, Natalie, so much for your time.
A deep, deep pleasure. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast episode on how work-life balance is a lie, well, here's 3 things you can do if you feel called to do them. First, share this with a friend. Send them a personal message on how this episode can help them be more present and to give themselves grace for doing all the things. Second, leave a rating and review for the Color Your Dreams podcast so more women of color and allies can create a sustainable business career and, more importantly, life. Third, if you would like to see how to work with me to create a more sustainable life, like me and Natalie, where you can be more present with yourself and create your own checklist of success, even if that checklist of success is watching Netflix, and it's not a checklist of success created by society and loved ones, then schedule a complimentary legacy, business, and career review call at elainelou.com/call. That's ELAINELOU.com/call. CALL. Legacy Leader, did you enjoy today's episode? If so, subscribe to the Color Your Dreams podcast and leave a rating and review. It goes a long way and it lets other fellow leaders find this incredible free resource. And if you want more, you can find all the links and information mentioned in this episode in the show notes on my website at elainelou.com/podcast. That's ELAINELOU.com/podcast. All right, Legacy Leader. I'll see you in our newest episode in 2 weeks. And remember to follow your dreams to lead your legacy.